Well, I remember around elementary school time, my father used to occasionally take me out into the countryside in Korea with his assistant, Elder Song Chang-no, and I used to ask them to tell me stories. And I remember a story that my father told me about a Korean woodcutter with his wooden backpack called a chige. It was all filled with wood, and he was crossing over the valley mountain pass, to get to the other village to sell his wood. And the pass got narrower and narrower. And as he was walking through the pass, he noticed this orange and black striped piece of rope. And he thought, well, that could be useful for something. So he reached over to grab it. He put his backpack down. And too late, he noticed that it was the tail of a tiger. And it was lying between a forked tree. So he knew the only thing he could do was to grab the tail and pull so the tiger would get slammed up against the tree and not be able to get him. And it was snarling and slashing, trying to get him, but he was able to hold it temporarily. He started yelling for help, and nobody came. And for hours he was struggling, crying out for help. And finally he heard a noise, and he thought, oh, finally someone's coming. And he turned, and his heart sank, because it was a monk. And monks are not allowed to harm any life. So he quickly tried to think of a way to convince this monk to help him. And he noticed that the monk was young and inexperienced, perhaps. So he said, please help me. And the monk said, no, I'm sorry, I cannot do anything to harm any life, human or animal. And he said, well, this tiger must have killed a lot of people, so you'd be actually saving a lot of people by killing it for me. And the monk said, well, that's a good point, but I think I cannot do that. And the woodcutter said, well, why don't you hold the tiger's tail, and then I will go and take care of the tiger, so you won't have any responsibility. And the monk thought, yes, that's a good idea. So he let him do that. And the man let the guy hold the tail. He stood up, put his chige backpack on, and walked away. And the monk said, wait, what about our deal? And the man said, I was so impressed with your faith, I thought I would become a monk too. And as a monk, I cannot harm any life. Well, I remember sometime in high school, Mom had been more free to do her nursing work as the kids had gotten more independent, my siblings, and she was starting to talk about spiritual nursing care, and I was curious what she meant. So on a home visit from high school or boarding school in Cheonju, she took me to a Korean house, a poor family house where someone was not feeling well, and I was impressed by how Mom would ask them a lot of practical questions about their kitchen, and show me what you eat, and just showed them genuine interest in their lives, and they were so happy to have someone care about them. And then she finished by asking questions about their children, and then offered to pray with them, and very boldly asking them about their faith and their belief in Jesus, and prayed to Jesus. And they were very visibly happy to have Mom pray with them, and that was very meaningful to me to see that. When people ask me about my testimony, I'm a little confused because there were a lot of events in my young life when I realized that I needed to be more committed to Christ, and the single most important moment, though, was in somewhere between 7th and 8th grade in high school, and I felt very convicted by a short-term Baptist preacher who was challenging us to come up front, and I refused to come up front. But that night, I thought a lot about it, and I realized that I did believe in God. I just wasn't sure if Jesus was God, and so I prayed that God would reveal to me that that was true. And I remember the next morning feel very strongly that what God wanted me to do was to read my Bible, and that started a process of getting more convicted that Jesus really was truly God and the Son of God, part of God.
So, Paul, as your sister, I wanted to ask you, how old were you when you realized that you should be a Christian? Were you at KCA, in high school? Do you remember?
Well, the first time was in elementary school at a camp.
Okay.
Can't remember which camp it was, but there was a big bonfire, and they asked the kids to come up and throw a pine cone in and make a commitment, and that was the first time I can remember. There might have been earlier moments.
Yeah, because I might have been at that bonfire. Was I there?
Possibly.
As your sister, 2 years older, I remember throwing a pine cone in the fire.
Possibly, yeah.
So maybe you were there, and so you did that too.
Yeah.
So that was your first time you made it public.
Yeah.
I remember they said you got to make it public. If you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth. And so I realized I'd never really confessed it publicly. So I threw the pine cone in. Maybe that was the same time.
Probably.
Cool. And then after that, I had an experience of doubting if there was a God. What happened after that for you?
I don't remember.
Okay. But in high school, did you consciously feel like, yep, I believe in God?
Well, I think the Baptist preacher was convicting me of sin, and that I needed to make more of a conscious decision. And so that was when I realized, probably in my early teens, that I needed to make a more adult decision and consistently follow the teachings of the Bible.
Okay.
I remember Mom and Dad really wanted us to grow in our faith and be exposed to a lot of different things and to be challenged, and Marty and I were encouraged to go to basic youth conflicts in Atlanta, a large church, and it was well organized, and they encouraged us to make a commitment to read the Bible at least 5 minutes every day, and we made that commitment. I'm not sure if it's wise to make a promise that you can't keep, because that's really an impossible promise to keep, but I really did try to do that and continue to try to do that. So, and that was really important, because God speaks to us through the Bible, through His Word. Another thing they had us do was to hop on a bus to go down to Dallas and learn how to share our faith using the 4 spiritual laws, and that was very meaningful. Got us out of our comfort zone to knock on doors and share our faith.
This is Mom's youngest of 6 children, Nancy Hannon. And I'm going to ask her, I'm Marty still, I'm going to ask her her impressions of growing up in Korea as a missionary kid. Just a few ideas.
Let's see. Well, I remember walking down the hill from our compound with Sam, my brother, and going through the gate. We had to we could get out the gate, but we couldn't get in the gate without the gate man letting us in somehow or knowing who we were. And I remember walking down the road, not very far, and buying our own candy and saying a few words in Korean to be able to buy candy. And then other times we'd walk further down into the town of Chunju and go see a movie or something. So Sam and I went together to watch the first Star Wars that ever came out in English. We also went hiking up in the mountains, and we played in our one-room schoolhouse. We played outside up in the tennis court that the missionary families had built for us. And one of the things I did as a child was we had dance lessons. So I was able to wear like the Korean hanbok, and we learned how to open and shut a fan with one hand and do dance moves to a drummer. I think that was the main instrument. And then what else? We had these long sticks that had a sleeve covering it that we would wave. What else did we had umbrellas. Anyway, that was part of the dance routine.
Yeah, that was in Chunju
Yeah.
when you were a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went away to KCA.
Yeah. And at KCA, that was really fun because everyone it was such a small school that we all had to do everything. So we all played in all the sports. We all had to be in all the musicals. We helped with the Harvest Festival. And yeah, so for example, my class had 6 or 7 people in it for every year of high school, middle school and high school.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And you probably went on a few retreats, like up to Chidi-san Mountain, or...
They ended the Chidi-san retreats,
Oh.
and it made me so mad.
Oh, did you go on a boat?
We went to other retreats. Yeah, so they weren't as interesting as the Chidi-san retreat.
Did you go on a boat, or where'd you go?
We for the senior sneak, we went to Jeju-do.
Okay, so you got to go on a boat. We didn't get to go to Jeju-do. That's good. Yeah, that's
I
nice.
think we flew there though.
Oh.
It's hard to remember. And then we went to somewhere in Seoul. We went to a retreat center for a retreat. So it was mostly about just kind of hearing speakers and having time away from our normal campus.
That's nice.
Yeah.
When you were how old you went to KCA?
I must have been 11 or 12
Yeah.
for 7th grade.
Same with me. Everybody. Yeah. Who was your first roommate?
Well, at that time, there were so many kids that we had to put 3 in a room.
Oh.
So I think it seems like I had 2 roommates. Shannon, I think there were 2 Shannons, but I might be wrong. Shannon Aldridge and Shannon Grant.
I don't know either of them, because you're 12 years younger
But
than
I
me.
might be wrong anyway.
No, I didn't know any of your friends.
Those are some of my friends anyway.
Yeah. And Sam was already there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And KCA is the boarding school.
But my best friend at KCA was Ellen, and she became my roommate later.
Ellen Topple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, actually, she might have been my first roommate, but they added a 3rd person in.
Oh,
So.
okay. Okay. And what were some things that affected your spiritual life? At KCA, did that influence you spiritually?
Sure, yeah, a lot.
And
There were journeymen that came from the Baptist missionaries, and they were usually the women, but also the men. But some of the women journeymen would lead a Bible study that me and some other girls would have with one or more of them at different times. So there were different women who influenced me and them, all my friends. So yeah, that made a big influence. And we also just had other types of, like, I don't know if we called them prayer meetings or what they were exactly.
When I was there, they had chapel. Probably had it when you were there. Once a week, they have chapel. But I don't know how influential.
I remember if we had chapel. Oh, seemed like we would have, but I remember that from college, but not from KCA.
Okay.
But I do remember meeting with the dorm parents. They would have like a once a week gathering of everyone in the dorm living room.
Who were they?
The Davises were the main ones that I remember the most.
They
Later
were-
we had some others, but they were the ones that I think had the most.
They were music teachers when I was there.
Yeah,
They were still music teachers. Maybe.
yeah.
And then you went to college. And how did that affect you spiritually?
Well, I went to Gordon College in Massachusetts, as did two of my siblings, and I mean, it was a good school because I appreciated it because I didn't feel like it was. They weren't trying to spoon feed us a particular way of thinking. As Christian people, they wanted to teach us to think for ourselves and make our own choices, and they showed us that there was a wide array of ways to interpret things as Christians. So I appreciated that. I felt like they were treating us like adults. So I liked that.
So you were exposed to other things, not just what your parents.
Yeah, and a lot of them were diametrically opposed. So like I got interested in political theory, for example, and philosophy, and there were Christian people on all different sides of the spectrum, disagreeing with each other very strongly.
So did you have a time when you made a commitment to God, or did you just always believe?
I did. You were probably the one that first helped me like say a prayer and like make a decision to ask Jesus into my heart, which isn't part of the tradition that I belong to now, but I still value that and appreciate that.
How old were you?
Probably about 5.
Oh, and that's sort of the time when you thought you saw an angel. You remember?
Yeah.
Well, you did see an angel. As a child, you really thought you saw an angel. Remember?
Yeah, I think I told my mom I'd seen an angel.
Saw a bright light.
It didn't even look like what we think of as an angel, but yeah, I just kind of knew internally that it was an angel.
Yeah, you couldn't sleep, and then you said then you could sleep, and
I don't remember the details. I remember that where I was sitting, that I was in the living room, and it was like way up high. It was just basically a really bright light shining over the bookshelf.
Wow.
That was like yeah.
And you were just 5, and you knew it was an angel. Wow. So one of the highlights, I think, of our lives in Korea was going to the beach every summer and staying there a month. So what were some highlights of that for you?
Well, Sam and I were real close growing up, so we pretty much spent every day together doing everything.
That's awesome.
And so he was older than me, so he kind of took the lead. So we would go to the back bay and look for whatever creatures we might find, and we'd go through the scary, whatever it was called, where the soldiers had like a camp. We had to go through there, and we walked through the trenches to get to the back bay. And we had fun, like just playing with the creatures, seeing enemies and things like that.
Do you remember the Vespers
Yeah.
point?
And we also played on the beach itself, and we would find like an old inner tube. Sometimes they were just lying on the beach. I'm not sure how they got there. And I would climb on the inside of the tube and curl myself up inside of the middle. And Sam would push me down, and I would roll head over heels into the water.
That sounds dangerous.
It was scary, but it was fun too.
Sam's brave.
Yeah. Oh, another fun thing we did was our cabin wasn't too far from this place where all the missionaries stored things. I don't know what we called it, but it was some storage place. and we had these big old oil drums that we used to store things, and maybe they had oil in them. I can't remember what they had in them. I think they were just empty, but I'm not sure. But my dad had we would lay the barrels down, and Sam and I would walk the barrels down the sandy road between the two places, the storage area to the cabin. So that was always fun.
Why did
balance
you?
On them, and that was the way to get them there.
You were trying to walk on them?
We would roll on top of the barrel to get it to move, to get it to roll forward.
And you don't know what was in it, but why did you?
I forget. He must have needed it for something. Sam probably remembers what it was for.
Oh,
but Dad needed the barrels, and so he got us to walk them down by walking on top of them.
And that was fun.
And it was fun, yeah. And I learned to ride my bike there on the sandy roads.
Cool. Yeah. I remember stepping in mud puddles after hurricanes, and all the mud would cling to your feet.
Yeah, there were some pretty big rainstorms there at the beach.
Yeah,
you could hear it
hurricanes
hitting the roof, the metal roof.
Oh yeah.
All night long.
Fun. Yeah, fun. Good memories.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have a little time left. So then you went to Gordon College, and then you met Paul, and soon after that you got married. Wasn't it?
Pretty soon. Not right away, but yeah.
And then you moved to Alaska, but not immediately.
Yeah.
You ended up in Alaska.
Right.
You took how many kids with you up to Alaska?
All 5.
You had 5 kids before you went to Alaska?
Yeah.
All 5?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, because I always connect you with Alaska.
Yeah, that's where we raised all 5 kids.
But they were born before you left in Kansas and where?
DC area.
Okay.
Virginia.
Yeah.
And New York. New York City.
Oh, that's where you lived when you first married New York.
Yeah.
That was an experience, I'm sure.
Yeah. We went
New
to
York
church
City.
in Manhattan, and we lived in Queens, Ridgewood.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. I remember visiting you there. And you had babies, and then you went all the way to Alaska on foot. No, practically. You pulled all your stuff in a car, right?
With a trailer, yeah.
And you camped out on the way, and the bears came. Right?
We saw the bears. Some bears along the way.
And you had babies. Did you have you were feeding?
We had dogs.
And you had
Brought
dogs. How many dogs?
Well, the first couple of times we went, we were just going to kind of explore.
Oh, okay.
And then we went to Uganic Island, and then we moved up there the next summer. We weren't, anyway, yeah,
Okay.
short.
So, would you say your time in Alaska was just awesome?
It was really wonderful. It was a great place to raise kids because there was a lot of homeschoolers, and I wanted to homeschool because I met homeschoolers, and I told myself I want my kids to turn out like that.
Oh.
So I was very motivated. And in Alaska, there was a lot of state support for homeschooling. I forget what I was going to say next.
And well, in Alaska, so you moved to Kodiak Island, and you kind of had to camp out.
We didn't move to Kodiak, but we fished. My husband's a fisherman. And so we bought a set net site, and that's what first took us there permanently.
What's a set net site?
It's a place where fishermen set their nets out from the shore. So they anchor it in a certain configuration to catch the salmon that are swimming by.
Okay.
And then a tender boat comes by, and you sell your fish. You kind of have a contract with the tender for the season, and every time you deliver fish to the tender, they pay you. So
Yeah, and then you had to get all your supplies from tender
from
boats.
Kodiak. We got taken out there with our skiffs and on another boat. It was a big process. Yeah. And then we ordered some of our groceries from the tender. They would bring it by, and it was very expensive. But we tried to bring most of our food, and we also foraged for food sometimes.
Yeah, I heard you made blueberry pie with
Salmonberry pie.
What?
Salmonberries.
What's salmonberry?
They're kind of like a raspberry, but they're different colors, and they're larger. So they're like yellow, bright orange, yellow, purple, and red.
Are they
and
sweet?
they're all mixed. They're really sweet and big. And yeah, I made really good salmonberry pie.
And you washed your kids in a big metal tub.
Yeah, we found a tub under the house. It was an old cabin that someone had built. It was land we leased the land, but the cabin was built on the land. And I can tell you a fun story.
Yeah, tell us.
One day when Paul and one of the boys had gone to the Kodiak town for some reason, I'm not sure if someone was sick or they needed supplies, I had been left with the other kids. And John and Rachel after dinner wanted to go get salmon berries. They said, Mom, if we pick salmon berries, will you make us a pie?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I was a little nervous because Paul was gone and they had to cross a little tiny brook.
How old were they? About?
I think John might have been around 10 or 11 or
Oh.
12 maybe. And then Rachel's only a year behind him. So
Okay.
maybe not quite that old actually.
Okay.
Maybe like 10 and 9.
Okay.
So I thought about it and I said, well, as long as if you see a bear, you have to just turn around and just walk back. Don't run. Just walk and come back.
Ooh, scary.
And so, but we'd never seen a bear, so I didn't have any reason to think that they would see a bear, but we knew that grizzly bears were on this island. So they were like, oh yeah, we'll do that. So off they go, and I'm doing dishes. And then pretty soon, John comes running back to the cabin and comes up to me, and I'm sitting in there doing dishes. He's not sitting, standing. And he says, Mom, we saw a bear. And I was like, oh no, did you remember to not, why are you running? You're supposed to just walk because they might chase you if you're...
Yeah.
And then Rachel comes not too much behind him.
Yeah.
And she says, Mom, we saw a bear. And I said, are you sure? Because she was at that age where maybe she was younger, because she was at the age where they would like make up stories a lot.
Okay.
Rachel was a good storyteller.
Oh, okay. Maybe
And
5.
She said, yeah, I was picking salmon berries and I was going to pick a berry and I saw what looked like a nose and I realized it was a bear.
Oh my goodness.
So I turned around and came straight back.
Oh.
And then I said, are you sure, Rachel? It wasn't just, you're imagining things. She said, Mom, when you see a bear, you don't stop to check.
Very good.
So I was doing dishes, and then within like half an hour, I was looking down the beach, or maybe even 15 minutes. I saw a big old grizzly come rambling out from where they were picking berries onto the beach, and he rambled off. So then I was like, oh, they really saw a bear.
God protected them. So that was an amazing story. And then your kids all grew up and went to college, and you were empty nesters. And you moved around in Alaska. You went back to Homer. And then...
Well, my husband went to law school in Alabama for 3 years.
Okay, then you moved
we
up
went back to
Alabama, and then you went back to Alaska. And then what? Then what made you want to come to Knoxville?
Well, yeah, we lived in Homer.
Where we are now.
We lived in Homer, Alaska the whole time that we lived in Alaska. And when all the kids moved away, I really was interested in using the degree that I had from graduate school in international studies, and there really weren't opportunities like that in Alaska. And so other than work, a little bit we were really close to the native people in Alaska. So that did kind of make me feel somewhat connected. Just having that connection with the indigenous people there. But I was wishing that I could do more than, there weren't that many opportunities. I was a waitress for a while. I worked as a caregiver. I worked with the kids that went to summer camp, things like that.
And
I taught piano.
And you had become Orthodox way back, Orthodox Christian, way back in college. So you were working with Orthodox missions or something. Yeah,
I was active in the church with music. So I was choir director, and we sang a lot, the kids and I and my husband. But yeah, so I just felt like it was time to do something else, and all my kids had moved away from Alaska at the time. And so I also had joined a business that taught me to think of possibilities and dream about things that I could do in my future, and to open up the door to any possibility. So because of that, I started thinking, if I could do anything I wanted, what would I be doing? And I decided I wanted to buy a house in Tennessee and live with my mom. And so that all came to pass. to make a long story short.
Yay,
But
here you are.
And then
Yeah.
Mom was able to come live with us. So
Yeah.
thank God. Yeah.
Mom was in assisted living, and you kept saying, Mom, come live with me. And she finally realized that would be much better.
I'd given up actually, but we were still trying to buy a house where that would be possible, that she could come live with us if she wanted.
And you could live near her.
But the housing market was really tough to get into. And we kept getting outbid even though we were bidding high on homes. And so one day she just said, she kind of came to herself is kind of, I think, how she put it or came across anyway, that she realized, why am I here? You know, where everyone's basically waiting to die. And she didn't want to be in that environment, and she realized maybe it would be really nice to be with us. And so I was like, yay, please do. We would love that.
Yeah.
So.
And Dad had just passed away. When did
like
he
4
pass
years,
away?
3 or 4 years before that.
What? She was alone for 3 years?
Yeah.
3 or 4 years? And then she moved to assisted living, and then she thought that was a little institutional.
Yeah.
So she took you up on your offer.
Yeah.
And you were able to sing to Dad. And tell me about that before he died.
Yeah. I knew everyone knew he wanted hymns sung while he was dying or preparing to die. And so it was around Christmas time, and Rachel was visiting me, and we were together, and I think we sang a few different times. But
Over the phone.
yeah.
To him, he really liked that.
Yeah.
He was in hospice for only 1 day.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, probably he'll have, 3 months or 5 months. And 5 days after his diagnosis, he was gone.
Wow.
He was, I remember he couldn't breathe very well. He was kind of gasping for air.
Yeah.
So when he died, I felt relieved. Like, oh, good, he's in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was 88, I think. Anything else? Any last words? You're happy to be here with Mom, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's really good for her.
It's nice to be able to see a lot of family come through the area.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Come visit her, and we have an extra room, so.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, this has become an Airbnb.
Go KCA Dragons! Hi, I'm Sammy. As one of the littlest kids in the old Chunju, Korea Folta family, I know I got a lot of special love. And I'm really appreciative of that. But with 5, a lot of energetic, loud, capable brothers and sisters, Marty, Paul, Johnny, Danny, and Nancy, but sometimes it felt like I didn't really have my own childhood. For me, it became a joy not to have any opinion, not to participate in the decisions, but just to follow others' choices, and just to find a quiet hole to climb into with a book and take comfort in my own thoughts. I've never been good at following directions to get to places or fixing things because that was already covered by multiple people in my family, people bigger than me, who already had it all figured out. Don't get me wrong, I loved and still love each one of my siblings, not to mention Dad and Mom. But it wasn't there I was going to find my identity, confidence, or the true meaning of my life. Perhaps that's why I enjoyed hobbies that took me out of the house. Nature photography, bird watching, or hobbies that took me deep into an undisturbed room in another part of the house, stamp and coin collecting. Perhaps that's why I stayed in faraway China or in out-of-reach Boston. Perhaps that's why I'm sensitive not to be left out and I have an overdeveloped sense of justice. Perhaps God used this to help me learn deeply from books in general, but especially from His book, the Bible, and to draw me close and forever to Himself. Since I'm sure this was intended to be a more of an upbeat sort of video montage, why don't we focus some on my conversion story? I was just a little boy, maybe 7 years old. Most of my older brothers and sisters were away at KCA, living in the dorms, far away, and I was happy with that. It seemed like now, having my own little kingdom, I would blossom, but I guess it was already too late. My personhood was already permanently impacted. But I did emerge just a little. Anyway, long weekends were when the siblings came back home, and I had to hide again. But my eldest, crazy artist, romantic, and emotional sister, Marty, was excited about something she'd heard at KCA Chapel, and it motivated her to come and find me. Deep in that, I think I was honestly playing by myself, deep in that walk-in closet in our mansion of a home. But anyway, she found me. Sammy, it was to my chagrin, although I guess secretly I liked the attention. Sammy, do you know Jesus? Because if you just say you know Him but don't really know Him, you're going to go to hell, Sammy. Jesus loves you, Sammy, and you need to pray to accept His love. Okay, Sammy? Will you do that with me? Now repeat this prayer after me. Well, I don't know exactly where my heart was, but I'd never had a problem with Jesus, and I think I was sincere. I just followed, like always, my big sister and prayed. God, I'm a wicked sinner, but now, Jesus, I accept you as Savior and Lord of my life. Thank you, God, for saving me. Hallelujah. Amen. And off my big missionary sister, Marty, ran to tell her teenage friends what had happened. She has never stopped, and I love her for it. And I've never stopped loving Jesus either, and respecting Dad, rest his soul, and loving Mom dearly, and each of my siblings in our big, wonderful family. Here in China, I almost always see kids from families with only 1 or maybe 2 kids. Sometimes I envy them for the attention they get, but actually, I think they're missing something rich that we had when we were kids, although I'm not exactly sure what it is. It doesn't really matter whether your family is big or small, though maybe God used it to make you who you are. What really matters is if you appreciate what He's given you in your family, what He's given you by His Son, my Savior and Lord, Jesus.
Have I got a story to tell you? It was the summer after high school graduation at KCA, and some of my friends in the previous class, I think most of them were back in Korea visiting that summer. John Linton, Walter was there. He graduated with me, Somerville. Lee Gamage, Tim Grubb. I think there might have been one or two others. I don't remember. But anyway, we decided to go for a hike up Chirisan. And John Linton was being followed by the Secret Service and getting tired of it. So he wanted to escape. So he rounded us up and we hiked up Chiri. The first fun thing that happened on the break at this first spring, on the way up Chiri, we stopped to have a drink, and I think it was Tim Grubb challenged the rest of us, and we all hiked up the rest of the way naked. Anyway, we got up there and, of course, had to swim in the frigid water of the pond, and after a day or two, we decided to hike back down a different way. We were going to hike along the ridge to Grandmother's Altar. It's the highest point on the mountain range there, and then from there go down a different route. So we got an early start, and we were bushwhacking along the ridge. I don't think there was a real good trail for part of the way. And at one point, Tim Grubb was climbing up over a boulder, and the boulder rolled onto his foot. He got injured. We had to help him, I think, and he limped and the rest of the way. But anyway, when we got up to Grandmother's Altar, we found out, which is this pile of rocks on top of the peak, we found out it's actually an army camp there, and it had a barbed wire fence all the way around it, or maybe a chain link fence with barbed wire on top. So we sat there on the outside of the fence trying to think of what to do and devised a plan. We found a hole under the fence where this drained gully was, and we crawled under there and huddled together and decided that we would march single file up to the altar singing Yankee Doodle Dandy, just like in the movie The Great Escape, because we knew we would get in trouble and get caught entering this army camp. So we did that. We marched up, we climbed up on the altar singing Yankee Doodle Dandy, and then we looked around and there wasn't anybody there. It was like an abandoned army camp. And then we noticed a curtain down below us in the barracks open and then close. And we waited. And then pretty soon the building started shaking, and all these soldiers come tumbling out, pulling up their pants and loading their guns and putting their boots on all at the same time. It was pretty funny. And they managed to come up and surrounded us on the altar, pointing their guns at us, told us to come down. John Linton says, "All right, nobody speaks any Korean." And so they were trying to ask us who we were and where we came from, what we're doing here. They were actually obviously very upset. And we just pretend like we didn't understand what they were saying. And after a few minutes of that and the negotiations getting nowhere, John Linton said, "Come on, guys, follow me." And he breaks through the ring of soldiers and marches toward the gate. And we follow him, and we're just about to the gate to let ourselves out. And the head soldier shoots his gun right over our heads. It was a little frightening, and we stopped. And he came down with a piece of paper and a pencil and said, "Name." So we all wrote our names down, except John Linton. He didn't. But he didn't, with the trouble he was having with the secret police, he didn't want to add any more trouble. So they didn't notice that he didn't write his name, but we all wrote ours, and they opened the gate, and off we went down the mountain. Halfway down the mountain, we stopped at a spring to take a break and have a drink. And we met some soldiers who were coming up the mountain, carrying some supplies back to the army camp on top. And as usual, we were friendly and spoke Korean and had a nice chat with them. And they were amazed at how well we could speak Korean, of course. And then we headed on down the mountain, knowing that they were heading up the mountain and they would reconcile their story with the ones up on the mountain, and we'd be in big trouble. So we picked up our pace. We got down to the trailhead. Luckily, a taxi was there. and we hopped in and sped off and made our great escape. They never caught us. That's my story. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. A couple times Marty has mentioned that how much Mom and Dad trusted her and trusted us, and the impact that had on us. If you look at all 6 of their kids, we all love God and following Him, and I think one of the main reasons is because of the role models that we had. I mean, the way they were parents and raised us, and trusting us was a big part of that. And they could do that because they trusted God, and it was real, and we could see that it was real. And they had a genuine faith, and the priority in their life was to serve God. And I think that really rubbed off on us. Both Mom and Dad used to say things that I still remember that really stuck with me. Different difficult times in life growing up, they would say, well, God will show you what to do, They would, if we wanted to do something, maybe that they weren't, in favor of, they would say, well, you'll make a good decision. And they would just show that trust. And that really was a big force in helping us to make good decisions. And I remember one time I was home for my year off after my first year of college, and I had joined this motorcycle club in Chunju, and there was a big race coming up, and I had been practicing, and it was in a stadium, the flat track race where you go sliding around the corners. It's really fun. Anyway, there was a race down near Sunshan somewhere, not in Sunshan, I can't remember which city it was, where the cherry blossom festival every year is, I guess, in the spring. And so I went with the motorcycle club, and I was going to go with the motorcycle club. Dad wasn't around for some reason, but Mom was very much against the idea and just, afraid I would get hurt or something. And she was starting to say, I don't remember exactly, but, to tell me, well, you're not allowed to go. You can't borrow the car, and I'm not going to let you go. And I was a bit shocked because it wasn't really like her. And I said, I think I said something like, Mom, just, think about if you really want to say that or not. And she did. And a few minutes later, she came back and said, it's your decision. You do what you think is right. Well, I went anyway, and I didn't get hurt, and we had a great time. But I actually came in second place in my race. I got a little trophy and all that. But just her ability to let go and trust, and trust God and trust us kids. It's very powerful. Thanks.
Hello, I am the oldest of the Folta children. I am Martha Stewart, the original Martha Stewart, the real Martha Stewart. And I'm gonna sing for you all the little Korean songs I know, at least most of them. Okay, here we go. 산 토끼 토끼야 어디를 가느냐 깡충깡충 뛰면서 어디를 가느냐. That means, mountain rabbit, where are you going? Jumping, jumping, that's where I'm going. And I'll sing. 예수 사랑하심은 거룩하신 말일래 우리들은 약하나 예수 권세 많도다. 날 사랑하심, 날 사랑하심, 날 사랑하심 성경에 쓰셨네. Let's see, what's another one? Oh, 지르릉 지르릉 비켜나세요. 자전거가 나갑니다. 지르르르릉 칭칭. It's about a bicycle going down a hill. 우리는 꼬부랑 노일 피타키르 스르르르 돌아온다오. I'm gonna go turn around and come back. Here's another one. 학교 종이 땡땡땡. Wait a minute, how's it go? 학교 종이 땡땡땡. 선생님이 기다리신다. 앉아서 기다리신다. I forget the tune of that one. It means the school teacher's waiting for you. You better hurry up and go to school. Let's see, what's another one? 아리랑 아리랑 아리요. 아리랑 고개를 넘어간다. 땡땡땡땡땡땡땡 델리디디디디디 아리랑 아리랑 간다. That's a famous Korean song. 동해물관이 배가 돼 나나나니나나. This is the national anthem. 니나나나 니나나 ma. I don't know the words. Okay. What's another one? 송아지 송아지 얼룩 송아지 엄마 소도 얼룩소 엄마 닮았네. That means little baby cow, beautiful baby cow. You look like your mother, baby cow. So I guess your mother's beautiful too. Okay. 반짝반짝 작은 별 아름답게 비치네. 서쪽 하늘에서도 그쪽 하늘에서도 반짝반짝 작은 별 아름답게 비치네. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Let's see, what's another one? 나비야, 나비야, 이리 놀러가느라. 노랑 나비, 흰 나비, 우물쭈물 가느라. 고요한 밤, 거룩한 밤, 여름에.
Hi, I'm John. I'm number 3, the third Folta kid. And I'm an old man now, but I want to tell you some stories about what it was like to grow up in South Korea in 1960. We did all the normal things that kids do. We rode bikes and had friends and water skied and played sports and did all the normal stuff. We didn't know that we were living an extraordinary life in an extraordinary place, and we had a great time doing that. When I was little, Mom would wake us up with a new song every morning, a new made-up song. She'd come up with it off the top of her head and get us going, getting ready for the day. So that was something special. We had a Korean maid that came in and stayed with us and took care of us kids and helped clean clothes and cook and that kind of thing. We had a Korean man that came in and was our gardener and cook, and so that was that was something a little different that most people don't see. We lived in a world where there were two languages spoken, English and Korean. And so I grew up on the back of a Korean lady. She wrapped a blanket around both of us, and she would do her housework, and she would sing to me and tell me stories, and so it's only natural that I actually spoke my first words in Korean and later learned how to speak English. I remember asking Dad at the end of his 40 years of service in South Korea if he ever dreamed in Korean. He said, "When I first came to Korea, I thought in English and I translated into Korean. But now, not only do I dream in Korean quite often, but I often think in Korean and translate into English. Even now, we sometimes start a sentence in English, and sometimes a Korean word just fits better, and we'll throw that in the middle of it." We didn't have a TV, so we would play outside most of the time, and played sports and built forts, secret forts, and hunted each other with our BB guns. And on rainy days, we'd go inside and read our comic books and read all sorts of other books. We'd read them till the pages fell off. Korean farmers used human and animal waste to fertilize their fields. Because of that, Korea at that time had a huge problem with parasites. Matter of fact, our lobby in our hospital was adorned with huge jars full of tapeworms for the people to see that they needed to be more careful about what they put in their mouths so that these tapeworms wouldn't grow up inside of them. Because of that, we would boil our water for 10 minutes to kill anything that might be in it, and then let it cool off before we would drink it. I remember going with Mom to the open air market downtown. There'd be fish all over the tables, people ringing bells trying to get your attention, and clanging scissors trying to get your attention, and they would have cows' heads on the ground next to the fish, and everybody would be hollering and shouting and arguing over prices. Matter of fact, you were supposed to argue over the price, otherwise you were doing things wrong. So if you didn't talk the vendor down to about half price, you were not doing your job. So that was fun watching Mom do that. When we drove downtown, our whole family, we'd have Korean kids climbing up on the sides of our car. They'd be looking for a free ride, and the whole time they'd be shouting the only English words that they knew: "You are a monkey, you are a monkey." And apparently that's what the Japanese had taught them to say when the Americans drove the Japanese out of South Korea. They thought that would be a wonderful gift to teach the Koreans how to say that to greet us as the Americans came. Once when I was 6 or 8 years old, I decided to get on my bike and go for a bike ride. So I went downtown and found myself at the train station, and the engineer in the locomotive waved me over and invited me up into his cab, and so I climbed up into his cab, and he wanted to practice his English on me. So when it was time for the train to leave, he taught me which levers to push, and here I was, a 6-year-old driving the train, and I drove the train for about an hour and speaking English to him back and forth, and we drove a few towns over, and he hollered to one of his buddies in a train going back where I'd come from, and so I scampered off that train and climbed up on the next train and drove it back to Chunju, where I lived. So that was quite an adventure. Our dad would teach each of us to drive before we were 10 years old. So we'd be in the driver's seat, pushing the pedals on the manual Land Rover, four-wheel drive Land Rover, and we would be driving all over the countryside. He wouldn't let us drive in towns where there was too many people, but out in the country, we would take turns driving that car, and we have many interesting memories of near misses and sometimes hitting dogs, and so we've got that memory. We drove all over our province in South Korea, hunting pheasants. Me and my brothers and my dad, we'd be hunting pheasants and rabbits and deer from time to time, and we'd just be bouncing and bumping all over the roads in South Korea doing that. That was a fond memory. Once when we were hunting, we even found some tiger tracks in the snow. Dad called us over, and we all looked at the tiger tracks and asked him if we could hunt the tiger. And he said, nope, nope, nope. When we kids grew up, we had a huge American military presence right in pretty much in our backyard. We had missile bases and Air Force bases, and that's because not too far away, just a few miles away in North Korea, there was a potential invading force that we always had to be aware of, and always had our bags packed and ready to evacuate if we needed to. My dad would sometimes be called to fill in for the chaplain at these military bases, and so we'd go with him, and we got to eat American food, which was a treat. But sometimes I can remember there being some military exercises going on. They would be shooting mortars, or they'd be firing off different ordnances. And a couple times we saw them raise some missiles up out of these hidden bunkers in the mountains, and it was fun for a young kid to be near all this power and all this stuff. I remember standing next to the runway one night watching the jets, the Phantom fighter jets taking off into the night with the blue flames flying out of the back of the plane, and just the awesome power. Matter of fact, we'd be on more than one occasion, we'd be out hunting or doing whatever, and here came a jet. There were no rules about how high they could fly or how fast they could go, or who they needed to be around when they broke the sound barrier. And so here would come a jet, and he'd be going faster than sound, so you couldn't hear him coming, and he'd be flying just a few feet over the trees, just a few feet over the short trees, and right over our heads, and you'd see him before you could hear him, and he would knock you off your feet. It was amazing. He'd get your heart beating, that's for sure. When we kids turned 13, we would all go off to boarding school, and we would stay there for between 4 to 6 years, depending on how our furloughs landed. And so we'd be away from Mom for that time. Mom and Dad, they'd come to visit us from time to time, but we were kind of having another adventure by living away from home for all that time. Got a little older, and we'd head off to college all by ourselves. About every 4 years, we would go on furlough, and that meant we would climb on a plane and we'd fly either one way around the globe or the other way. Either we'd go by Europe or we'd go by Hawaii, and we'd fly back to the States, and we'd stay for a year and go to an American school, and got to see Grandma, and we would go visit our supporting churches. That was one of the things that we did, and we would, I can remember all of us kids up front in the churches in front of 200 strangers, and we'd be we'd be singing "Jesus Loves Me" in Korean, and it was embarrassing, but Dad would make us do it, so we would do it, and he'd reward us with a McDonald's meal afterwards or something. I grew up in a land where there were mountains and trails just perfect for bicycle riding and hiking and motorcycle riding. I grew up in a land where there were tigers and dragons and monsters, if not in reality, at least in our minds. It was a wonderful place, a place where dreams could come true and where adventures were behind every tree and around every bend. It was truly the most wonderful place in the world to grow up in, and I'm so thankful for my childhood and for the adventures that my parents provided for me. Of all of my adventures, my best adventure by far was I got to meet the one that sent my dad to South Korea. My dad dedicated 40 years of his life to serving the kind and gentle people of South Korea. South Korea is called the land of the morning calm, and I don't think it's calm for any other reason that the people are just so loving and so giving. I can't tell you the stories of the people that my dad would introduce me to, the mountain people that he would serve, that would walk for hours over the mountains covered in snow, in their thin rubber shoes, in the rain and the snow, just to come to church and to put their little money in the offering plate, and give that to the one that they had come to love and the one that they had decided to serve. I met the Savior that my mother was so in love with, this Jesus fellow, and he worked his way into my heart, and I gladly received him incrementally from a young age, hearing Bible stories and listening to preaching. So that was a huge part of our life. We would go with Dad out into the countries, and he would give them a special treat. They didn't have televisions or anything. He would set up a movie projector and run a generator, and we would watch the Jesus films, and all of that helped to work its way into my life and into my heart. So that was something that has stuck with me, and not only the memories, but this love that all of us Folta kids have for our Savior, and the adventures were all part of it, but that's certainly the biggest, best part of our adventure that we've taken away from our life in South Korea.